Kang Minho pressed his datapad against the wall panel and watched the energy readings stabilize. The maintenance tunnel beneath the Imperial throne room was cramped and hot, but he preferred it down here. Up above, powerful aliens argued about who should rule the galaxy. Down here, the machines simply needed someone who cared enough to keep them running. He wiped sweat from his forehead and checked the next connection point. The Throne of Ascendancy drew enormous power when it tested candidates. For 3 months now, it had rejected every single one. 200 aliens from the most important species in the Galactic Imperium had sat on that ancient seat. 200 times, the throne had remained dark and silent. Minho did not understand politics. He was just a human maintenance worker, trying to earn enough money to send home to his family on the colony world. Humans were newcomers to the Imperium, barely 80 years since first contact. Most aliens still saw them as primitive and unimportant. Through the ventilation grate above his head, Minho heard voices. The selection ceremony had paused for a break. He recognized the harsh tones of Krethian nobles and the musical speech of the Valorn diplomatic caste. They were arguing again. 3 months of failure, one voice rumbled. The throne grows more mysterious with each rejection. Perhaps it has broken, another suggested. 10,000 years is a long time, even for such an artifact. Impossible. The technicians have checked it thoroughly. The throne simply finds no one worthy. Minho smiled slightly at that. He had been one of those technicians. The throne was not broken. If anything, it was working exactly as designed. The question was what it was looking for. He gathered his tools and climbed the ladder to the service entrance. He needed to check the power couplings behind the throne itself. The timing was good, with all the important aliens taking their break in the outer chambers. When Minho emerged into the throne room, he stopped to stare as he always did. The chamber was massive, with walls that seemed to stretch up forever. The Throne of Ascendancy sat on a raised platform in the center, carved from a single piece of unknown black material that seemed to absorb light. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with their own inner light. Minho approached carefully, his tool bag over his shoulder. He had permission to be here, but he still felt like he was trespassing in a sacred space. He moved behind the throne and opened the access panel. The door suddenly burst open. A group of aliens swept into the chamber, laughing loudly. Minho recognized them as younger members of various noble houses. They had been drinking, he could tell from their unsteady movements. "Look, the maintenance human is here," one of them said in heavily accented common tongue. It was Lord Vex, a Krethian whose family controlled 3-star systems. "Does it think it can fix what stumps our greatest minds?" The others laughed. Minho kept his head down and continued working. He had learned long ago that the best response to mockery was silence. "You know," another voice said, this one belonging to a tall, Valorn female, "I heard the funniest thing. Some humans actually believe they might produce a worthy candidate someday." "Humans," Lord Vex's laughter boomed through the chamber. "That primitive species? They barely understand quantum physics. They still use chemical fuels on half their worlds." Minho's hands tightened on his tools, but he said nothing. Let them have their fun. It would pass. "We should demonstrate the absurdity," the Valorn suggested. Her voice carried a cruel edge. "Place the human on the throne. Let it see how far above its station this seat truly is." "Brilliant," Lord Vex agreed. He grabbed Minho's arm with a hand that could crush stone. "Come, maintenance worker. Time for you to play emperor." "Please," Minho said quietly. "I'm just trying to do my job." "And we're just having a bit of fun," Lord Vex said, dragging him toward the throne. "Sit." "I really shouldn't," Minho protested. But 3 other aliens were pushing him now. He stumbled up the steps to the platform. "This isn't appropriate." "Sit," Lord Vex commanded, and shoved Minho down onto the throne. The reaction was immediate. Light exploded from the throne in waves of brilliant white and gold. The symbols covering its surface blazed with intensity that made everyone shield their eyes. A deep hum filled the chamber, growing louder and louder until the floor itself vibrated. Minho tried to stand, but the throne held him gently in place. Not with force, but with something that felt almost like welcome. Energy swirled around him in patterns that the monitoring systems had never shown before. Above the throne, holographic symbols appeared in the air, ancient writing that no one had seen in generations. The main doors slammed open. Palace guards rushed in, followed by imperial advisors and representatives from every major species. They had all felt the surge of power. They all came to see what impossible thing had happened. Lord Vex stood frozen, his face showing pure shock. The other nobles backed away slowly, realizing what they had done. "It accepts him," someone whispered. "The throne accepts the human." High Counselor Trevak, an ancient being who had served 5 emperors, approached the throne slowly. His multiple eyes studied the symbols floating in the air. "These are marks of recognition," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "The throne has chosen." "Impossible," a Krethian general shouted. "He's human. He's nobody. This must be an error." "The throne of ascendancy does not make errors," Trevak replied firmly. "It has rejected princes, warriors, scholars, and diplomats for 3 months. Now it accepts a maintenance worker. We must honor its choice." Minho finally managed to speak. "Please, there's been a mistake. I was just checking the power systems. I didn't mean to sit here." "Your intentions do not matter," Trevak said, though his voice was not unkind. "The throne sees what we cannot. It has made its selection." The light slowly faded, but the symbols remained, glowing softly. Minho sat on the throne of ascendancy, the most powerful seat in the known galaxy, and felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. His simple life of fixing machines and sending money home had just ended. Around the chamber, he saw expressions ranging from shock to anger to calculation. Political wheels were already turning. Factions were already forming. And somewhere in the crowd, he knew, were people who would rather destroy the throne than accept a human emperor. The joke had become something far more dangerous. And Minho, who had never wanted power, now held more of it than any being alive. The emergency council session lasted 6 hours. Minho sat in a side chamber, still wearing his maintenance uniform, while aliens argued about what to do with him. Through the door, he heard voices rising and falling in heated debate. "The law is clear," High Counselor Trevak kept saying. "The throne has chosen. We must respect that choice." "The law was written when only civilized species competed for the throne," General Krath shouted back. "Humans have been in the Imperium for less than a century. They lack the wisdom to lead." A female voice cut through the argument. "Then let him prove himself. The ancient protocols demand 3 trials for any disputed succession. Let the human take the tests. When he fails, we can reject him properly." Minho closed his eyes. He did not want to be emperor. He wanted to go home, to see his parents and his sister, to work with machines that made sense. But he could not simply walk away now. The throne had put him in an impossible position. The door opened. A woman entered, dressed in formal diplomatic robes. She was human, probably in her 40s, with sharp eyes that had seen many negotiations. "I'm Ambassador Sora," she said in Korean. "I've been assigned to help you." Minho stood and bowed slightly. "Thank you. What's happening out there?" "They've agreed to test you," Sora said. 3 trials, as tradition demands: military strategy, political negotiation, and system interface. These tests are designed for people who have studied leadership their whole lives. She paused. "I won't lie to you. They're expecting you to fail." "I'll probably fail," Minho said honestly. I fix air recyclers and power conduits. I don't know anything about running an empire." "Maybe that's exactly why the throne chose you," Sora said quietly. She handed him a tablet. "Study this tonight. I've compiled everything I could about the trials. Tomorrow, everything changes." The first trial began at dawn. Minho entered a simulation chamber filled with holographic displays. Military officers from a dozen species watched from the observation deck. The scenario appeared before him in 3 dimensions. 2 fleets approach conflict over a disputed border, the test proctor explained. "One belongs to the Krethian Empire's northern houses, the other to the Valorn Concordat. Both claim the same resource-rich system. As Emperor, you must resolve this before war begins. You have 30 minutes. The displays showed ships moving into attack positions. Minho studied the information, feeling overwhelmed. He knew nothing about fleet tactics or military doctrine. The officers watching probably expected him to choose a side or order both to stand down by imperial authority. But as Minho looked closer, he noticed something. The disputed system contained rare medical resources. The Krethians needed it because a plague was spreading through their colonies. The Valorn needed it because their breeding worlds were suffering from a genetic disorder. Both sides were desperate. Both sides were afraid. Neither actually wanted war. Minho opened a communication channel. "This is the Throne's Chosen," he said, feeling awkward using that title. "I see that both of you need the resources in this system for medical emergencies. What if we don't fight over who owns it, but instead work together to harvest what both of you need?" Silence followed. Then a Krethian commander appeared on screen. "The Valorn would never agree to cooperation." "We might, if the Krethians weren't planning to take everything," a Valorn admiral responded sharply. "Then let's set fair amounts for each side," Minho suggested. "The system has enough for both urgent needs. After the emergencies pass, we establish a joint research station. Both of your people can study the resources together and maybe find ways to create more." He worked through the details, asking each side what they actually needed rather than what they claimed to want. Within 20 minutes, both fleets were standing down. Within 30, they had signed a preliminary cooperation agreement. The test proctor stared at the results. In 300 years of running this simulation, no candidate has ever achieved a peaceful resolution. They all choose military victory for one side or the other. The second trial came that afternoon. Minho was placed in a negotiation chamber with holographic representatives from 6 species locked in a complex trade dispute. Each blamed the others for economic problems. Each demanded different solutions. For an hour, Minho simply listened. He asked questions but offered no judgments. He learned that the real problem was not the trade routes they argued about, but a communication breakdown that had lasted for years. Small misunderstandings had grown into major conflicts. "What if we're all partly right?" Minho finally said. "The trade routes aren't working because they were designed 50 years ago for different conditions. Instead of arguing about the old system, why don't we design a new one together?" He facilitated a discussion where each species explained their actual needs, not their political positions. Slowly, a solution emerged that none of them had considered before. It was not what anyone had originally demanded, but it gave everyone something they truly needed. The observers whispered among themselves. Another unexpected success. The third trial was the most difficult. Minho was taken to the Imperial Core Systems, the ancient network of computers and quantum processors that managed information across the entire Imperium. He had to interface with them, demonstrating that he could handle the overwhelming flow of data an emperor must process. The moment the connection established, Minho's mind filled with 1,000 voices. Reports from every corner of the galaxy flooded in simultaneously. Most candidates panicked at this point, unable to handle the sensory overload. But Minho had spent years working with complex systems. He understood that you could not process everything at once. You had to understand the system's purpose first, then let it help you. He relaxed and stopped fighting the information flow. Instead, he asked the systems a simple question. What are you trying to tell me? The chaos organized itself. The systems were not trying to overwhelm him, they were trying to serve. They had been designed to help emperors understand their people's needs. When Minho stopped trying to control them and started listening, patterns emerged. He saw areas where people suffered. He saw places where resources were wasted. He saw opportunities for improvement that no one had noticed. The systems wanted an emperor who would use their information to help people, not to dominate them. After an hour, Minho disconnected. The technicians monitoring the test looked stunned. He integrated with the systems at 97% efficiency, one reported. That's higher than the last 4 emperors combined. High Counselor Trevak stood before the assembled council that evening. The human has passed all 3 trials, he announced. Not merely passed, but excelled in ways we have never seen. The throne's choice is confirmed. Minho sat in his quarters afterward, exhausted. Sora brought him tea and sat across from him. You did the impossible today, she said. I just tried to solve problems, Minho replied. The way I always do. Listen first. Understand what's really needed. Then find solutions. That's leadership, Sora said gently. Real leadership. Maybe that's what the throne has been waiting for all along. Outside, Minho knew powerful aliens were plotting. They might accept the test results publicly, but privately they would never accept a human emperor. The real challenges were just beginning. But for tonight, he had proven something important. He had proven that worth was not about species or status. It was about how you approached problems and treated people. The throne had seen that in him. Now he had to survive long enough to make a difference. The coronation ceremony was the most elaborate event in the Imperium's history. Representatives from every species attended, though many did so with barely concealed anger. Minho wore the imperial robes uncomfortably, missing his simple maintenance uniform. When High Counselor Trevak placed the crown on his head, Minho felt the weight of more than just metal. He felt the expectations of trillions of beings across thousands of worlds. Some hoped he would succeed. Many more hoped he would fail quickly. You may now address the Imperium, Your Majesty, Trevak said formally. Minho stepped forward to the holographic transmitters that would carry his words across the galaxy. He had prepared a speech with Sora's help, but looking at the assembled faces, he set it aside. I know most of you think I don't belong here, he began in common tongue. You're probably right. 3 weeks ago, I was checking power couplings in maintenance tunnels. I never wanted to be emperor. But the throne chose me, and I've spent the past weeks trying to understand why. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I think it's because I'm ordinary. I'm not a brilliant general or a master diplomat. I'm just someone who learned to fix things by understanding what they're supposed to do. And I think the Imperium is broken in ways that need fixing. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Several nobles looked offended. But Minho continued. For too long, the biggest species have dominated while smaller ones struggle for scraps. Major worlds prosper while colony planets barely survive. We call ourselves an Imperium, but we're really just a collection of territories held together by force. I want to change that. I want us to be partners, not masters and servants. The murmurs grew louder. General Krath stood abruptly. This is exactly why humans should never lead. You understand nothing of the complexity of governing so many different species. You're right. I don't understand everything, Minho agreed. That's why I'm going to listen. Starting tomorrow, I'm visiting every region that has petitioned for imperial attention. I want to see the problems myself and hear directly from the people living with them. Emperors do not make personal visits like common diplomats, a Velorn princess said coldly. You diminish the office. Then maybe the office needs to be diminished, Minho replied. What good is a throne if the person sitting on it doesn't understand what life is really like for the people they're supposed to serve? The ceremony ended in uncomfortable silence. As Minho left the great hall, Sora caught up to him. "That was either very brave or very foolish," she said. "Probably foolish," Minho admitted. "But I meant what I said. How can I make good decisions from a palace when I don't know what's actually happening out there?" Over the next 2 months, Minho did something no emperor had done in 1,000 years. He traveled to disputed territories, struggling colonies, and forgotten border worlds. He went with minimal security, often showing up unannounced. And everywhere he went, he listened. On a Valorn agricultural world, he learned that their people were starving because trade regulations favored industrial planets. The laws had been written by species who didn't understand Valorn biology or needs. In the outer colonies, he met humans and a dozen other minor species who worked dangerous mining operations with outdated equipment. The major species controlled the supply chains, keeping prices high and wages low. On a Krathian military outpost, he found soldiers who hadn't been paid in months because the noble houses were hoarding resources for political games. These soldiers were supposed to be protecting the border, but they were too busy trying to find food. Each visit taught Minho something new. The Imperium's problems were not simple. They were layers of old decisions, forgotten purposes, and systems that had stopped serving the people they were meant to help. He also met Ji-Yoon, a human systems analyst working on a remote station. She had spent years studying how information and resources moved through the Imperium, trying to find ways to make things more efficient. When Minho saw her work, he immediately asked her to join his advisory team. "You want me to help run the Empire?" Ji-Yoon asked, surprised. "I'm a data analyst, not a politician." "That's exactly why I want you," Minho said. "I need people who understand how things actually work, not how politics says they should work." Back at the palace, Minho began implementing changes. He restructured trade regulations to be fairer to agricultural worlds. He opened supply chains that had been monopolized by major species. He redirected military funding from political projects to paying soldiers and maintaining equipment properly. Every change created enemies. Noble houses that profited from the old systems fought him. Traditional advisors warned that he was moving too fast, breaking too many established practices. "You're making the Empire unstable," General Krath told him during one heated council meeting. "These systems exist for good reasons." "These systems exist because they benefited the powerful," Minho replied calmly. "If the Empire can't adapt to be fair to everyone, then maybe it deserves to be unstable." What surprised Minho most was the throne itself. As he worked toward making the Imperium more equitable, the throne's power seemed to grow around him. He could feel it during important decisions, like a presence that approved of his choices. It responded to his intentions in ways the technicians said they had never seen before. One evening, while working late in the Imperial study, Minho placed his hand on a throne interface terminal. Information flooded his mind, but different than before. He saw images, memories that did not belong to him. He saw the throne being created 10,000 years ago, saw the beings who made it. They had been afraid that power would corrupt their empire, that leaders would use authority to dominate rather than serve. So they created the throne as a safeguard, an intelligence that could recognize true servant leadership and reject those who sought power for its own sake. The throne had waited 10,000 years for someone like Minho, someone who did not want power, someone who saw leadership as service, not privilege. "I understand now," Minho whispered to the empty room. "You're not looking for the strongest or smartest. You're looking for someone who remembers what it's like to be powerless." The throne pulsed with warm light, confirming his insight. But understanding the throne's purpose did not make his position safer. Ambassador Sora brought him troubling intelligence reports. Multiple noble houses were forming a secret coalition. They were pooling military resources and making diplomatic agreements. "They're planning something," Sora said. "My sources can't confirm what, but there's been too much secret communication between houses that normally hate each other." "A coup?" Minho asked. "Probably. They can't attack you directly while the throne supports you, but if they could find a way to destroy the throne itself, or separate you from it." Minho looked at the throne behind his desk, its black surface reflecting no light. It had chosen him to protect something important. Now he had to find a way to protect it in return. Ji-yoon entered with new data analysis. "I've been tracking the resource movements you asked about," she said. "There's definitely something wrong. 7 major houses are quietly stockpiling military supplies, and they're all doing it near the capital system." "How long until they're ready to act?" Minho asked. "Weeks, maybe days," Ji-yoon replied. "They're moving faster than normal military preparations." Minho stood and walked to the great window overlooking the capital station. Millions of beings lived here from hundreds of species. Most of them just wanted to live their lives in peace. They did not care about political games or who sat on the throne, but those games were about to put all of them in danger. "Send messages to all minor species ambassadors," Minho said. "I want to meet with them privately. It's time they knew what's coming and had a choice about which side they want to support." The coalition of traditional houses thought they were isolated actors moving in secret. But they had forgotten something important. The emperor they wanted to remove had spent his whole life fixing broken systems. And Minho had learned long ago that the first step to fixing something was understanding all the connections others overlooked. The minor species, the overlooked and underestimated, were about to become the most important players in the empire's future. The diplomatic conference was supposed to be a celebration. Representatives from 80 systems gathered at the Imperial Palace to discuss new trade partnerships. Minho had worked for weeks to organize it, bringing together species that had never cooperated before. He stood at the reception, making small talk with a minor species ambassador when the first explosion hit. The palace shuddered. Emergency alarms blared throughout the station. Through the great windows, Minho saw flashes of weapons fire in space. Ships were fighting near the capital, warships bearing the colors of multiple noble houses. "It started," Ambassador Sora said, appearing at his side. Her face was grim. "General Krath and 6 major houses. They've seized control of the outer defense platforms." Chaos erupted in the reception hall. Ambassadors ran for their ships. Security forces rushed to defensive positions. Minho's bodyguards tried to move him toward the escape shuttles, but he pulled away. "Your Majesty, we need to evacuate you immediately," the head of security insisted. "No," Minho said. "If I run now, the coup succeeds. They'll claim I abandoned the throne." Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. The palace's shields were taking fire from the captured defense platforms. On the status displays, Minho saw red markers indicating hostile forces moving toward the palace itself. Ji-yoon ran up with a datapad. "They're jamming most communications, but I managed to get a message out through the maintenance channels. Help is coming, but it will take time." "How much time?" Minho asked. "Hours, maybe a day. Can we hold that long?" Minho looked at the tactical display. The palace had defenses, but they were designed to protect against terrorists, not a full military assault. The coup forces had battleships and thousands of soldiers. "Get me a secure line to the throne room," Minho ordered, "and find everyone who's still loyal. We need to coordinate." In the throne room, Minho sat on the ancient seat and felt its power flow through him. The connection was stronger now than it had ever been. Images filled his mind, not just from the throne's memories, but from its sensors throughout the palace and beyond. He could see the coup forces positioning themselves. He could feel the fear of people trapped in the station. He could sense the throne itself, and for the first time, he heard it speak directly to his mind. "You understand now." The voice was not words, but pure meaning. "You understand what I am." "You're alive," Minho said aloud, "not just an artifact. You're an intelligence created to guide the Empire toward justice. I was made by beings who understood that power corrupts. They created me to find leaders who would resist that corruption. For 10,000 years I have searched. Most who seek the throne want power for themselves. You are different. You want to give power away, to share it with those who have none." "Why me specifically?" Minho asked. "Why a human?" "Because humans remember being weak. Your species arrived in this galaxy as newcomers, looked down upon by others. You understand what it means to be dismissed and underestimated. That memory makes you see others who are dismissed. You see the minor species, the forgotten colonies, the people that powerful leaders ignore." The throne pulsed with warm light. "That is why I chose you, and that is why they fear you. If you succeed in making the Empire truly just, the powerful lose their advantages." "Can you help me stop them?" Minho asked. "I can give you information and strengthen your connection to the palace systems. But I cannot fight for you. You must choose whether to stay or flee, whether to defend these ideals or let them die." Minho closed his eyes. He thought of his family back on the colony world. If he died here, they would grieve. But if he fled and let the coup succeed, millions of people across the Empire would suffer under rulers who cared only for power. He opened his eyes. "I'm staying." The throne's approval washed through him like sunlight. "Then I will help you." "Open your mind." Information flooded in, but organized and clear. Minho could see every corner of the palace, every loyal soldier, every possible defensive position. He could access the communication networks despite the jamming. Most importantly, he could broadcast to the entire Imperium. "Ambassador Sora, Ji-Yoon, I need you both here now," Minho said through the newly opened channels. They arrived within minutes. Minho stood from the throne, his mind still connected to its vast awareness. "We're going to broadcast to every system in the Empire. I need everyone to know what's happening and why." "The coup forces will hear too," Sora warned. "Let them," Minho said. "I'm done hiding what I believe." Technicians set up the holographic transmitters. Within the hour, they were ready. Minho stood before the cameras, the throne visible behind him, and began to speak. "My name is Kang Minho. 3 months ago, I was a maintenance worker. Today, I'm the emperor chosen by the throne of ascendancy. Right now, several noble houses are attacking the imperial palace. They're trying to kill me and destroy the throne itself. I want you to understand why." He paused, letting his words reach across light years to billions of beings. "They're attacking because I believe the Empire should serve all its people, not just the powerful. I believe minor species deserve the same rights as major ones. I believe that leadership means serving others, not ruling over them. These noble houses want an empire where they stay on top forever. They see reform as a threat to their power." The palace shook as another weapon struck the shields. Minho kept speaking. "I could run. There are ships ready to evacuate me. But if I run, I abandon everything the throne stands for. I abandon the minor species who finally have a voice. I abandon the colonies that finally have hope for fair treatment. I abandon you." His voice grew stronger. "So I'm staying. I'm asking anyone who believes in a fair empire to stand with me. Not to fight for me personally, but to fight for the idea that power should serve justice, not the other way around." Behind him, the throne blazed with light, as if adding its own endorsement to his words. Across the Empire, the broadcast reached millions of screens. On minor species worlds, People who had suffered under the old system heard a leader who finally spoke for them. On colony planets, workers who had been exploited saw someone who understood their struggles, and they responded. Within hours, ships began arriving at the capital. Not military vessels, but civilian transports, cargo haulers, colony defense forces, minor species that the noble houses had dismissed as irrelevant, small groups that had never had military power. But there were thousands of them. The coup forces suddenly found themselves outnumbered. Their battleships were powerful, but they couldn't fire on thousands of civilian ships without committing a massacre that would turn the entire empire against them. General Krath appeared on the communication channel, his face twisted with rage. You've poisoned the empire with your weakness. You've made the strong bow to the inferior. I've made the strong remember that strength comes from unity, not domination, Minho replied calmly. You can still end this peacefully. Stand down, accept reforms, and I'll guarantee your houses fair treatment under the new system. Never, Krath snarled. We will burn this palace to ash before we accept a human emperor. The channel cut off. Minho turned to his advisors. They're going to attack with everything they have. We need to be ready. But Ambassador Sora was smiling. Look at the tactical display. Minho looked and saw that the civilian ships were not just gathering randomly. They were positioning themselves between the coup forces and the palace, creating a living shield of thousands of vessels. They're protecting you, Ji-Yoon said softly. All these people you helped, all these species you gave voice to, they're willing to risk their lives to protect what you represent. Minho felt something break inside him, not despair, but the last of his doubt. He had been chosen for this. Not because he was special, but because he was ordinary enough to remember what ordinary people needed. The throne's warmth filled him completely. Now you understand, its voice whispered in his mind. True power is not forcing others to obey. It is inspiring them to stand with you willingly. The coup forces were gathering for their final assault, but they would have to go through thousands of people who had finally found something worth fighting for, an empire that might actually serve justice instead of just the powerful. Minho returned to the throne and prepared for what would come next. The standoff lasted through the night. Thousands of civilian ships surrounded the imperial palace, forming a protective barrier that the coup forces could not penetrate without causing a massacre. General Krath's battleships held their positions, weapons ready, but did not fire. Minho sat in the throne room, connected to the palace systems, monitoring everything. He had not slept in 30 hours, but the throne's energy sustained him. Around him, loyal advisors worked on communication channels, coordinating with the arriving support fleets. More ships are jumping in, Ji-Yoon reported. 16 minor species defensive forces just arrived. They're taking positions around the palace perimeter. Ambassador Sora watched the tactical displays with experienced eyes. Krath is trapped. He has the military power to win, but if he uses it, he becomes a mass murderer. Every species in the empire would turn against the noble houses. He might do it anyway, Minho said quietly. Some people would rather destroy everything than lose power. As dawn broke over the capital station, General Krath's face appeared on every screen. He looked tired, older than he had the day before. Behind him, Minho could see other coup leaders, representatives of the great noble houses. Emperor Minho, Krath said formally, we request negotiations. Minho stood from the throne. I'm listening. You've made your point. The minor species have shown they support your vision. But this empire needs stability. We propose a compromise. You remain as emperor, but the traditional power structures stay in place. The noble houses keep their territories and privileges. In return, we end this conflict peacefully. It was a reasonable offer in many ways. It would end the violence immediately. It would let Minho keep his position. But it would also preserve the exact injustices he had been fighting against. No, Minho said simply. Krath's expression hardened. You're willing to risk thousands of lives for your pride? Not for my pride, Minho replied. For principles that matter more than any of us. The Empire has been unfair for too long. Minor species have suffered while major ones prospered. Colony worlds have been exploited while core systems grew rich. I won't preserve that system just to avoid conflict. He stepped forward, speaking not just to Krath, but to everyone watching across the Empire. But I will offer you something better than compromise. I'll offer you partnership. Murmurs filled the throne room. Even his own advisors looked surprised. I propose we restructure the Imperial Council, Minho continued. Instead of noble houses controlling everything, we create a representative system. Every species gets seats proportional to their population. Every region gets a voice. The throne remains as a check on power, but shares authority with an elected body. You're talking about democratizing the Empire, a noble house representative said with disgust. That will create chaos. It will create fairness, Minho corrected. And yes, it means the noble houses lose absolute power. But you keep your worlds, your wealth, your culture. You just have to share decision-making with everyone else. That's not chaos. That's justice. General Krath was silent for a long moment. And if we refuse? Then this standoff continues until you run out of supplies or support, Minho said. But I think you know that path ends badly for everyone. The minor species won't back down. They finally found hope, and they'll defend it. Another face appeared on the screen. Lord Vex. The Krathian noble who had started everything by pushing Minho onto the throne as a joke. He looked haunted. What guarantee do we have that minor species won't use this new system to punish us for the past? Vex asked. It was a fair question. Minho thought carefully before answering. The throne will guarantee it. Its purpose is to ensure justice, not revenge. Anyone who tries to use the new system to oppress others, whether they're from major or minor species, will face the throne's rejection. He placed his hand on the throne's armrest. The throne chose me because I understand what it means to be powerless. But I also understand that justice can't be built on punishment. We need to move forward together, or we'll just create new cycles of resentment. The throne pulsed with approval, its light visible even through the screens. The coup leaders could see that the ancient artifact, the most powerful symbol in the Empire, supported this vision. High Counselor Trevak, who had been silent throughout the coup, finally spoke. The Emperor offers wisdom. Power sharing is the only path that doesn't lead to endless conflict. I support his proposal. Over the next hour, more voices joined. Some coup leaders agreed reluctantly. Others left the communication in anger, refusing to accept any change. But slowly, momentum built toward acceptance. By midday, enough of the coup forces had stood down that the remainder were isolated. General Krath, seeing his coalition crumbling, finally deactivated his weapon systems. We accept negotiations, he said heavily, not because we believe in your vision, but because the alternative is too destructive. That's enough to start with, Minho said. Belief can come later. The next 6 months were the hardest work of Minho's life. He negotiated with dozens of factions, each with their own demands and fears. He worked with Ji-Yoon and other analysts to design a fair representation system. He consulted with the throne regularly, using its ancient wisdom to guide difficult decisions. The new Imperial Council was finally established at a ceremony attended by every species. Instead of 20 seats controlled by noble houses, there were now 200 seats distributed proportionally. Minor species had real power for the first time in the Empire's history. Some noble houses left the Empire entirely, refusing to accept the changes. Minho let them go peacefully, believing that forcing them to stay would violate the principles he fought for. But most stayed, adapting to the new reality. The throne's role changed, too. It remained as emperor's seat, but its power was now balanced by the elected council. Important decisions required both imperial and council approval. The throne seemed satisfied with this arrangement. After all, it had been looking for someone who would limit absolute power, not someone who would keep it. During the inauguration of the new council, Ambassador Sora found Minho standing alone on an observation deck, watching the ceremony through the windows. "You did it," she said. "You changed an empire that had been the same for 10,000 years. "The throne did it," Minho replied, "and all those people who risked their ships to protect the palace. I just gave them something to believe in." "Don't diminish what you accomplished," Sora said gently. "You could have kept absolute power. The throne would have supported you. Instead, you gave most of it away." Minho smiled. "The throne chose me because I didn't want power. If I had tried to keep it all, I would have become exactly what it rejected in all those other candidates." He had started making time to return to maintenance work. Once a week, he put on his old uniform and checked power systems, fixed malfunctioning equipment, and talked with the workers who kept the palace running. The noble houses thought it was beneath imperial dignity. The common people loved it. Ji-Yoon had become the head of the new Imperial Technology Coordination, working to share advanced systems with minor species worlds. The gap between core and colony was slowly closing. A year after the coup, Minho received a message from his family. His parents and sister were coming to visit the capital for the first time. He felt nervous and excited. They would see him as emperor, surrounded by ceremony and power. He wondered if they would still recognize their son. When they arrived, his mother looked at the throne room and all its grandeur. Then she looked at Minho and said in Korean, "You look tired. Are you eating properly?" Minho laughed and hugged her. Some things never changed, no matter how much else did. That evening he brought his family to see the throne. His sister, always curious, asked, "Can I touch it?" "Yes," Minho said. "It's not dangerous. It just judges character." She placed her hand on the black surface. The throne glowed softly. A warm and welcoming light. It recognized her the same way it had recognized Minho, not as royalty or leader, but as someone with a good heart. "It likes you," Minho said. "What does it feel like?" she asked. "Like something very old and very wise, watching to make sure we don't forget what really matters." Years later, historians would debate Minho's legacy. Some called him the greatest emperor in imperial history. Others said he was simply lucky to be in the right place at the right time. Minho did not care about the debates. He cared that colony children now had the same educational opportunities as core world children. He cared that minor species could pursue their own development without exploitation. He cared that power was now shared, making it harder for any one group to oppress others. The throne remained with him, glowing softly in the imperial chambers. But its purpose was slowly becoming obsolete. The empire was learning to choose worthy leaders without needing an ancient artifact to do it for them. That was exactly what both Minho and the throne wanted. The best rulers, he had learned, were the ones who worked to make their own power unnecessary. The best systems were the ones that functioned fairly without needing a guardian to force them. Sometimes, late at night, Minho still walked the maintenance tunnels beneath the throne room. He checked systems, fixed problems, and remembered where he came from. He was an emperor who had never wanted to be one. And maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed most. The throne pulsed with warm light in the darkness, satisfied at last.